Okay, so we put together an agenda here of things to talk about, and we welcome you to add to the agenda. So if in covering things today we don't cover something that you want to hear about, or answers a question that you have, please feel free again to ask questions, make comments, put them in the chat, or go ahead and talk to us. Everyone will be able to hear you if you're on a microphone or if you're on your telephone. So we want to begin by providing an update on the Credential Engine. We're going to update everyone on the Credential Engine Technologies. We'll cover where things are with all of the partners, all of you on the call, and the credential information. We'll talk a little bit about the co-designing of the roadmap guides that we're working on with a subset of the partners, but is for the purpose of making that co-design work available to all of the partners, and then some next steps. So the Credential Engine update, for those of you who frequent our webinars, you've heard me talking about this quite a bit over the last couple of months, and how we're transitioning from the CTI, or Credential Transparency Initiative, to the Credential Engine. So over the last week, the new advisory groups for the Credential Engine were convened and met in person for the first time, and so was the board. And the Credential Engine also has an executive director, so it is official. The CTI branding has been removed from the websites and the materials. You might find some archival historic things that still have it, but going forward it is the Credential Engine, and it is a not-for-profit 501c3, and it continues the work of the CTI. So the mission includes scaling the web-based and open license credential registry, maintaining the credential transparency description language, and maintaining that work at app prototype, the search app prototype, to demonstrate the power of the registry. And with all of that, the overarching goal of promoting an open applications marketplace. So this is really great news, and we are all, the team members are extremely excited that this has happened and that the work will continue to move forward and accelerate. So if you have not already, visit the website, credentialengine.org. You can learn about Scott Cheney, the new executive director, and if Scott's in the meeting, I'll ask him to introduce himself. I don't see Scott in the meeting yet. If I'm missing him in the list, Scarlett or somebody let me know, because I see a lot of participants in the meeting now. Please subscribe to updates on the Credential Engine, so you can go to the website and put your email address in, and of course you only get emails as news comes out. As I had mentioned, the official advisory groups were formed. They had their first meeting in Washington, D.C., and the board of directors also met. So in addition to having formed the 501c3 and having the executive director and infrastructure of people to support it, there's also been multiple years of funding secured, and planning is underway for the long-term sustainability. The sponsors are the Lumina Foundation and JP Morgan Chase, and all that information is on the website. And for the short-term work through 2020, key metrics and outcomes have been identified. So we want everyone to know of this important information. Please feel free to pass this on to your colleagues. And again, we encourage you to subscribe to the website news. Ron, yeah, definitely we will send a copy of the slides for sure right after the webinar. Scarlett will actually send all of the partners, those who were able to make it and those who are not, a follow-up email, and it will include the PowerPoint. In the meantime, Scarlett can also put a little file pod at the bottom of the chat, so for those who would like to have it now, you could also download it. So any comments answer questions about what's happening with the Credential Engine. Some of this, I hope, is a little bit repetitive because that means we're sending a consistent message and consistent information. But with each webinar, we have new partners who are participating, and so it's important just to make sure that we are all on the same page and everybody is aware of what's going on, and making sure that everybody does understand what the Credential Engine Technologies are that I had mentioned just a moment ago when going over the new Credential Engine organization. So this is what it currently consists of, and you can see that currently there's 4 kind of big buckets of technologies that the team is working on. So let's just cover those. The Credential Transparency Description Language is the metadata infrastructure. We have a website where you can access this publicly open infrastructure that we want to make sure is available under an open license, and with a long-term goal of parts of it even being adopted by major search engines like Google, for example. And we do have Stuart Sutton has joined us, and he is the metadata expert who is leading that work with us. So as we go through these slides, if you have any questions for Stuart, he'd be more than happy to answer them. The next technology is the CTDL editor. And so this is for each partner who's participating today that we have entered some initial credential information for you to see in the Work It Search App prototype. We're using this editor to essentially transform your credential and quality assurance information into the CTDL, publish it to the registry, and demonstrate it in the Search App prototype. So for those of you who have a login to not only look at your credentials in the Search App but edit them, you're doing it through this thing that we call the editor, and its role is to map the information to the CTDL and then push it into the Credential Engine Registry. And then we have the Credential Engine Registry, which is a repository of metadata, and the Work It Search App prototype, and that we use currently for the purpose of doing basic searches and demonstrating the CTDL and the importance of transparent, comparable information. So right now it's not open to consumers. In general, it's a closed test environment that we want to begin to look at transitioning. So in 2017 and even over this summer, we'll be moving components of these technologies from what we call a sandbox or a test environment. So right now everyone's in this nice safe test environment. You have to have a password, to see information. And we're using all these tools as a way to learn and get input from all of our partners and advisors, but we want to accelerate having the technologies publicly available to go to what we call the live environment. So all of this takes the input on updates to the CTDL, on the updates to the editor, on the other technologies that I listed on that prior slide, advisement from the partners and advisors on minimally expected data for the registry and other kind of data quality type issues. And one of the things that you'll see in the next steps toward the end of the slide will be doing some focus groups for consumer search apps. So I keep mentioning the search app is a prototype meant for partners, and it includes a lot of information, but we will likely continue to have that as a prototype for kind of research and testing. And seeing a lot of information, but we also want to have a version of an app that's consumer friendly for the public. So we need to start getting some feedback from consumers on what they would like to see for that. So just to reinforce how it works now, we have all these technologies. They're all in a test environment. They're all in the sandbox, and they're all relying on this feedback loop. They're all relying on a feedback loop right now. So I want to just keep reassuring the partners that that's where we are, and you don't have to worry that your information is available to the public at this time. But we do want to continue to work with the partners to get to the point in 2017 where we accelerate the technologies being available to the public. Now let's talk a little bit about those technologies, the Credential Transparency Description Language, the CTDL, our metadata infrastructure. It's in a continuous review process. It was released to the public just in November, so not that long ago. It has since been updated in February, and we just happen to have another update coming out this Friday, April 28th. This work has been ongoing in conjunction with a technical advisory committee that has been meeting since November of 2015. So they've had an active involvement in this continuous review process. But so do you, because each credential that we research and look at and work with you on in those technologies in that editor has informed the CTDL. So we want you to know there's a continuous review process, and of course over time as the credentialing marketplace changes, the CTDL could be ever changing and never be stagnant. And let me just pause there for just one moment and see if Stuart wanted to just make any quick comments about that to the partners.
No, okay. You're doing fine.
All righty. So currently, the Credential Engine team, and namely a couple of the team members who are also on this webinar, David and Scarlett, have been the ones primarily responsible, and Emily too. Sorry, Emily. Emily Raphael, you may have received emails from them, one or all of them, and they're the team that's largely really spending a lot of time looking at each partner's credentials on their websites, because remember, it's public information that we're looking for. So they're looking at that public information, and then they're populating that editor that I mentioned, and trying to make sure all the information is as correct as possible. And then it becomes, it could be put in the registry and viewed through the search app prototype. So for those of you who have a login to see your credentials and edit them, you have access to this editor. And one of the things I want to mention is the team is going to be sending you some guidance. And so David and Scarlett were actually working on some of that this morning, and putting out some guidance, with screenshots and just really easy checklist on what to look for in the Work It app. And then, if you see anything that's incorrect or additional information that we can include, those kinds of things, we can definitely make those updates. And we just want to work with you to make sure that we're making, updates correctly. And you also have access to make those updates as well to your own credentials. So publishing to the registry, or this repository of metadata. So what I was just describing is this manual process, because it really has been a learning process. It's been extremely important, but obviously it's not the way in the long run, to keep information current in the registry. So we'll probably keep this editor around, and there could be some really great uses for it for organizations that may only have like one or two or a very small number of credentials that really don't change very much. They're stable. So we can have an editor where they could just enter them and put them into the registry. But ultimately, for the vast majority, we want linked data on the web, and we want to be pushing into or pulling from into the registry. And we'll talk a little bit more about the roadmap guidelines and working with a subset of the partners on co-designing that to be used by all partners. So it's not limited to that subset of partners that we're working with, but we're trying to make sure that we understand kind of like what's behind the scenes that we don't have access to help automate the processes and make them as easy as possible to automate pushing and pulling into the registry. One of the things that we're currently looking at with the advisory groups and with our partners is minimum expected data. And so this is also something, as we're working on the roadmap guide with that small subset, currently I think of 9 partners, that we're thinking a lot about. So the credential transparency description language, you want to think of it in terms of like your dictionary. All the words, all the meanings are available to you. You may not use every one of them every day, but when you need them, they're there. And so the CTDL is a large dictionary of terms, and it's for the ecosystem of credentials. And so what you want to do is accept all of that, or for the most part, most of it I should say, but the registry will validate that CTDL, and it will look for things like minimum expected data, which would be a subset of those terms. So this is something that we're looking for feedback on now, and you will be seeing some follow-up from us asking for some advisement from you. So I had mentioned the quality on the web or on the registry, and this is a slide that's not meant to show every single kind of data quality. It's just meant to indicate that there are kinds of buckets that we can put quality in. There are quality indicators that could be on the face of data, meaning we could all easily, see that quality. An example of that could be recognized quality assurance. It could be explicit statements of competencies, and again, these are just examples. There could be many more, and it could be the CTDL, the metadata level of completeness. There could also be quality indicators that aren't obvious on the face. So, the accuracy of the information or the assertions, the currency, or by currency we mean, how current, how correct and relevant is the credential information. When we're talking about quality on the registry, everything must scale. So we'll have automated quality mechanisms, and we'll look at and implement through the advisement of the partners and advisory groups and the recommendation of the board, other types of quality as well. So for example, say a code of ethics. So remember, keeping in mind that all of this must be scalable. So the key takeaways with the technologies and the minimum requirements in this quality going to scale is we want all of our partners to know that this is something that is being looked at very carefully now, and we are seeking input from the partners, and you'll see more kind of formalized follow-up for us. We'll ask you, to share your thoughts on these things. Before I go on to the next section, let me pause here and see if there's any questions or comments. And let me also see if any of the Credential Engine team who are on the webinar with me want to add anything to what I have covered.
Nope, sounds good to me.
Well, okay. All right, I'm getting kind of lonely, everyone, though, so feel free to talk or put things in the chat. I love questions and comments. So let's talk a little bit about where we are with the registry participant information. And so I'm talking about those partners who have joined us today, who have selected credentials, and keeping in mind again, for this pilot period in this test sandbox environment, they selected at least one. It wasn't about the quantity, it was just about having a wide variety of types of organizations and types of credentials, and having this as wide a variety as possible to test out all those technologies that I was covering. So what you're seeing here, registry participants, these are partners who have agreed to select one or more credentials to include with the project. And you can see that right now we have 99 total participants, and on the right-hand side with the chart is a breakdown of the types of credentials that are included so far. Now, there are other types of credentials that are identified by the technologies, by the CTDL, that aren't listed here. These are just simply what the credentials that these participants have selected. So we're still interested in other types of credentials that may not, be showing here yet. So I wanted to make sure that that is clear. So you can see, get a good idea of what that breakout looks like, and you can see here in the pie chart on the right here that currently we have a lot of certificates and we have a lot of certifications. And I just want to mention here with the certificates in this big slice of the pie that some of them are certificates offered by, say, community colleges or universities, so they're not always just an assessment certificate. They're a certificate being, maybe shorter time period and less than an associate's degree as an example. So I just wanted to clarify that. And let's see, Deborah has a question here. May I ask a question on the quantity slide? Yeah, Deborah, go ahead. Please do.
Hi, can you hear me, Jean?
Yes.
Oh, Jean, can you hear me? Oh, good. I wanted to find out a little bit more on the quality because that's actually one of the areas now I've been interested in learning more. So if you go back to the quality slide, I think I saw where you were working with ANSI in the Credential Engine. Whenever I think of quality in my world, I always think of standards. So who's creating the standards that you're going to benchmark quality against? Because that is one of the, from an ACT question, it is one of the things I'm looking at, and I can just think of the challenges around the question I'm asking, but just wanted to get your thoughts on that from a standards perspective of defining what is quality.
Right, and so the registry itself is not determining the quality. That would be over here in this kind of bottom right corner. So there's a lot of things the registry can automate in terms of like identifying is there quality assurance, and it can even identify those standards. So the registry can show the credentials that have QA that have met specific standards. That is already in place. Now, what the registry doesn't say is, this particular standard or these particular standards are the only standards that we'll have, or the only standards that would be followed. The registry won't do that. Now over here on this community consensus side would be, say, maybe where the code of ethics comes in, or maybe there's some other components that clarify what those standards mean and help consumers understand why those standards are important. So just to make sure that made sense, so with the CTDL we can identify quality assurance, we could even identify down to the standards that are followed, but it's not making a call on whether or not that is the best standard or the only standard or the top 10 standards. So that would come over on this bottom right side. And then with that, everything must scale in terms of the advisory groups and the board making recommendations on what might address those standards you were talking about. What that would be more on the application consumer end, and then taking and using that information effectively for the consumers. So let me see, did that answer your question? And then also see if maybe Bob or...
I think you've answered my question to the best, to the best that you can answer my question. I think you've answered it. I think I probably have more questions on the community capacity and consensus that, lower right-hand side but that's
Sure.
probably an evolving, I don't think you have that clearly defined yet. I think that's evolving. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. As I was saying, really the credential engine is just born, so to speak, and the advisory groups are just formed and the board is just formed. But these are, they actually all saw this slide, and so, it's something that is in process now, and it's just in the beginning. And in particular, all of it, of course, is being worked on, because we're in a sandbox test environment, but in particular, this kind of bottom right-hand corner in that more kind of human interaction, human decision, and making sure that everything is scalable.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Jenny, this is Bob. Hi, if I can add, and thank you so much for the question, because what you'll see in this slide is we have two things we're trying to convey here. One is communicating the quality of the credential, which as Jenny mentioned, that's why it's important to have any sort of a quality assurance entity to be able to say that this credential or this credentialing organization meets the standards as we define what quality is. That's why the quality assurance part of the registry is so important. But also the other one is quality of the data about a credential or credentialing organization. So this kind of slide addresses both aspects, which are both important.
Thank you, Bob. And then I see a couple
Thank you, Bob.
even on the chat. Oh, sorry, were you speaking?
No, I was just saying thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff, for sharing. Sharing is always appreciated. Definitely feel free to share information in the chat. And then Ron asked for clarifying how we're using the term scaling. And so, scaling, clearly we can write a definition for each technology, even scaling the quality. Everything has to be scalable, meaning, I think, in the end, very large numbers. In our, advisory meetings, we were, for example, talking about how it truly is an unknown how many credentials are out there, and we're not saying every single one of them will be in the registry, but we are expecting, substantial numbers, quantities of things. So we need to be able to scale, the bandwidth for all of that. So all the technologies have to scale to be able to handle the communication of the information, the accessing the information, the consuming of the information, defining and maintaining the quality of all the technologies and the information as well. Did I answer your question?
Gene, this is Stuart. Let me add a little bit to that. I think when we talk about scale here, we're anticipating a large number of credentials. When you look at the breadth of how we define credentials, it runs everything from badge to degree. So it's very, very broad. So we are probably, if I can look at my crystal ball, anticipating thousands of credentials, thousands of them. And what we mean by quality, maintaining quality on a registry at scale is if thousands of credentials are coming in, do you vet each one for quality? Probably not. Not at scale. Because human interaction, the more human interaction, the fewer the resources that are in the registry. And given that one of the goals is to be able to compare credentials in the marketplace, it means it's going to probably be a lot of numbers. And so the challenge is then to find those metrics and the methods of achieving quality that nevertheless permit scale.
Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, let us know, Ron, and of course everyone, if we're answering your questions sufficiently. Our intent is to continue to come back to our partners on these topics, to let get feedback, and as these things are all emerging. Okay, I'm going to go back to where I was with the participant information as of April 25th. So I had mentioned, the editor and how it's really right now a very manual process. And obviously, again, our plan isn't to continue this heavy manual process. It's been an essential learning mechanism, unavoidable, and we're grateful for it. And we see the need to have that for, very small quantities, and that are very stable. But all in all, it's automating in the end game here. But it has been a lot of research, a lot of time spent by the team, by Emily and Scarlett and David, who have been looking at all of the information about the participants, about the credentials. So you can see this chart is showing that these participants actually had 162 credentials, so they all didn't select just one. And so they're looking at a lot of information, and they're looking for that public information. And, oftentimes a lot of information is on the websites and it's easy to find, but sometimes it's not. And so there's follow-up involved and those sorts of things. So far, this is just to show that they've pretty good with the backlog, because for a while we had a bit of a backlog. So the vast majority of our partners who have selected one or more credentials should have received an email from them, should receive access. We're continuing to look at the information because, as I had noted earlier, for example, the CTDL has been updated, and it will be updated again Friday. Now we have instituted processes internally to speed up how we sync things up, but the last update was time consuming on our end to sync up all those technologies. So now we have a process in place, and we won't have that big lag time. But you can see there's 4 in the backlog. There are 15 that are not ready for entry yet, and that just means that the partner, maybe they haven't signed their acknowledgement agreement, or maybe they haven't even selected their credential. So you'll still be hearing from us even after your credentials are entered, and on some follow-up that we want to do, and going back and looking at that information kind of again and again, really, with you. Also, on the app, so as I noted, you have to have a login to see the app. And from the footer, under a column, if you go all the way down to the footer of credentialfinder.org, there's a link to this page, and this is the direct URL, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of data. And you scroll down the page, and you'll see it corresponds to the CTDL, and it corresponds to everything that you can see in the Work It app right now, but it's all aggregate. It's all aggregate data, but you can see there's a lot of it. You can click on any of those gray buttons, and then you can see those counts thus far. Now that data is pulling directly from the database, so as updates are made, the data changes. I think our technical person on this, handling this, it updates it like every 5 minutes. So anyhow, it's going to be ever-changing, but you can go look at it and see aggregate information and get a good idea of what's going on, what kind of information we have. Now, also want to mention that more data will be added, so it's not complete yet. We have a really good start here of a lot of different types of data that you can look at. But we're going to be adding more gray buttons over the next couple of weeks to sync it up to all of the possible, what then can be done as a search. So if you have a password to access the app in the password protected environment, you will know, like for example, you can see this is blue, it's a hyperlink. So when you're clicking on any of these and you see that data and you see that blue link and you're logged in, it will do a search. And then what you're seeing in the search results are all those things that met that criteria, so it should match up to the counts that you see. So take a look at that. I think it's kind of interesting to look at. Again, it's aggregate data, so it's not revealing any specific credentials, but if you have a login and then you click on it, then you could see in the search what is matching that criteria. Again, it's a sandbox, so data is ever-changing, and every credential is in some different level of completeness. So It gives you a good picture, but it's certainly not like final data, so please don't interpret it that way. So all this data, you know, like I said, is in the Search App prototype. It's all a sandbox. It's called a prototype. I don't think the way it's set up now will be exactly how it will look for the consumers. It's meant to show every piece of data that we get to the partners, so you can get a good understanding of what that means, how it can be consumer friendly, how it might be displayed, how it could affect a search, and you know, comparable and all those kinds of things. And it's been crucial for learning and co-designing. So thank you, partners. So you should have a password. If you have a credential in here and you don't have a password, then you can put something in the chat, or you can send us an email, and we'll make sure you have access. We are, you know, trying really hard to track all that, but there's always somebody new in the project, so we apologize if we missed you, but don't hesitate to ask. Now, I also want to add that to better understand the information and so the technical team can get feedback, partners will now log in to see all the credentials in the search. So I've been bringing this up in my last, you know, couple plus partner webinars, and again, it's not, the public can't see it, but the thing is, if you only have one credential and you only see your credential, it's really not helpful for you to get context. So partners who have a login, you continue to log in, but you should see all of the credentials that are in here in the sandbox in the test environment. But you can only edit your own credentials. So, you know, you might see, for example, this first Nazi credential here, but if it's not yours, you can't edit it. You won't see an edit button. But we think it will help a lot for all of you to see that context of the other credentials in there, because you don't know what you don't know. You might think, oh, well, my stuff looks great, but then you look at another and you're going, oh, but look what they have, you know. So I think it will help. And also, again, if your organization only has one credential, what good does the search do? You know, so now you can kind of fool around with that too. If you have any questions, or if you would like a one-on-one webinar to review the prototype, email Scarlett directly. Oh, Scarlett, you know what? I just realized I copy-pasted from your Outlook thing, and this email, I hope it still goes to you. You need to correct it. siu.edu, thanks. So anyhow, Scarlett will make sure that accounts get set up, that questions get answered. If you want a one-on-one webinar, she will cover those kinds of things. So let me stop there for a second, see if there's any questions on that, and then I'm going to move on to the roadmap, analysis, and crosswalking of partner data. And just the ETA on going live, well, some things are live. So for example, the CTDL is actually live. It's publicly accessible on an open license, and all the serializations are automatically generated, so it's totally usable and out there. For the other things like the registry and opening up, say, the incoming and outgoing APIs, we hope to have available this summer, late this summer. So 2017 for sure. The kind of theme right now is accelerating, and we'll, we're going to try our darndest, but we still are getting input. So I want to be careful also not to, worry any of our partners, because we'll still have testing environment, we'll still have what we call staging environment, and then we'll have this live environment. So that's a typical kind of process. So I would foresee still maintaining those kind of test and staging, so people who are like, well, I want to put my toe in the water and check it out, you still can, but we want to make that registry available to those who are ready to get their credentials in this summer. Are you, yeah, Pam. It's a popular name, especially in the exercise world. So, but actually, since you brought that up, WorkIt is actually submitted into the U.S. Patent Office for trademark, and so far it's being approved. So, but thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move on then if there aren't any other questions and talk about this roadmap that I'm bringing up. So you saw we have this large number of partners who have selected one or more credentials to include the credentialing organization partners, but we have a smaller subset of 8 or 9 partners right now that we're working more closely with specifically to implement the linked data on the web and in the registry. So those of you who have sat in on orientations and earlier webinars, you have seen this slide before. So this is meant as a reminder. What we want to do is have a roadmap to the open, linked, structured data on the web and in the registry. And this is based off the W3C's 5-star rating, and the words are different that they use, but what we wanted to say here is we want to kind of raise the bar, and we want to go from just raising awareness to a lot more open and linked structured data from credentialing organizations on the web. And for those of you who have sat in other webinars, you've seen, and I didn't include it in this one, but we always had that Google screenshot of how now just go to Google and you could find a hotel based on your check-in and check-out date. So in the future, we want to have those kinds of things, open and linked structured data on the web that both on the web and in the registry help people connect to much better information. So the goal, linked data on the web and in the registry. We're working with the credentialing organizations to co-design roadmap guides, and it's not just for them, but for all the partners. So, just as our process has been all along, we want to learn from our partners instead of just trying to guess. So, but what we want these partners to do is implement the automating of the publishing to the registry. And so what that will help us do is develop that in between, the go-between the registry and the linked data from the partners. So you saw this slide earlier. So when I'm talking about publishing to the registry, I'm talking about we'll have a mechanism so it can be pushed in there directly from partners that may have very structured data, say in a database, and they could use an API that we'll provide that will map. They could use for mapping and then pushing and then pulling. So we always refer to that as harvesting. So basically, essentially, the partner has the linked CTDL data on the web, and we go get it, and we then can pull it into the registry. So that's what we're talking about. So there's a process for that, and this is an image that shows that process. And this is where we are in the process with these partners. It's the step 2, and Stuart might want to talk a little bit about this process. This is the kind of the hardest process here because they have to look at their data and map it to the CTDL. So we've already kind of done that for them with the editor, right? But we did it all based on what we can find on the web. Now we want these 9 partners to better understand that mapping process themselves, so then we can go down here toward the data serialization and the linked data on the web. We may have some partners on here that are participating with it. If we do, they could feel free to comment on it. And then, Stuart, is there anything that you would like to add to the process and how we're working on this step 2?
Not really, Jean, other than to kind of reinforce that the co-design aspect of this. What we're trying to do, in addition to bringing 9 partners all the way through this sort of end-to-end workflow in these vertical channels, from depending on what their data is, whether their data is structured or unstructured, plain text, but to do that end-to-end workflow with people who are coming out of different contexts on the basis of their structured data or unstructured. so that we can develop the kind of documentation that would make others who are following the same end-to-end work pattern with the capacity to do it. So it is a co-designing process where we're trying to refine documentation. At the same time, we're trying to move through this process. And as you say, at this point, we're at the analysis level, step 2, and which, by the way, I think is probably the most complex of all. And that's taking the native data, the data that you have on your website, in your database, and mapping it to the CTDL. So it's sort of an intellectual exercise that takes a little bit of time, but the goal is that it's only done once. Once it's done, once the mapping is done, it can be either automated, or at that point it's much simpler to then generate the RDF descriptions of the credentials.
So while the partners are kind of doing this, and we've given them some instruction in a video and tools to use for this, now we're here, the team is here looking at what we can do on the Credential Engine side to remove barriers between here and here. So we want to get from 2 to 4B. And we want to alleviate the barriers between 3 and 4A here, and so make it make it as simple as possible based on structured and unstructured or text, and also we have very centralized and very decentralized systems as well, where say the university may have several sources of information that are relevant, and we may have very centralized things, say a certification body that really has very centralized information. So we're those 9 partners, what we did was look across and so we want all different kinds of orgs, all different kinds of credentials, and all different kind of behind the scenes, structured, unstructured, centralized, decentralized, so we can better understand those and alleviate the barriers here in 3 and 4. So, okay, so that all leads to moving forward, the 2017 goal. So, it is a goal that in 2017, along with the Credential Engine officially being formed and the infrastructure being in place to run the Credential Engine, that we're moving from the sandbox test environment to those live technologies. So just want to again reinforce that awareness of that happening, and I'll talk about the next steps. And good, we're like running a little bit ahead here. Any questions or comments on the information that I've covered so far? Okay. So for our next steps, we do have our technical advisory committee is meeting Friday this week. We still bring on new members. If you're participating with this webinar and you want to sit in on a TAC meeting, let us know, and Scarlett could send you the information. If you're interested in joining, let us know. We'll send you the information. We're going to continue, co-designing toward the scaling and accelerating. One of the things that I wanted to highlight here on the next steps was the vendor community. And so one of the things that, in particular with that smaller subset group of the 9, but possibly coming back and asking even more of our partners, some questions to identify the vendor community that is, the prevalent dominant. And it differs, so it's going to be different for certification organizations to, say, community colleges to other, 4-year post-secondary. I had mentioned the focus group, so the Work It Search App Prototype is a search app prototype. It has a ton of information in there because we're trying to test as much as absolutely possible. and it is meant for the partners to use and for us to use to, learn and tweak, change things. So one of the things we want to do is have the consumer version of that. So to do that, we'd like to do some focus groups. We'd like to do focus groups through the partners, meaning bringing some of your community members together. We get together in a computer lab, and we use a structured approach to get some feedback to see what it is consumers would really like to see. We continue to for you to provide your feedback so we can in turn refine the solutions. And we'll be setting a date in late May or early June for the next all partner webinar. So in the meantime, and I don't have these bullets here, as I said, so Scarlett, Emily, and David, who are on the webinar kind of behind the scenes, they're following up with partners individually. You'll be hearing more from them as that backlog has been alleviated. Now they're moving on more in a closer look to the information. They're putting together some nifty little like checklist guides to give to each partner specifically for their credential to say, here's what we found, here's what you're going to see, take a look at it, and what are we missing? What do we need to change? What can we correct, and those sorts of things. So you'll see that coming as well. Anything else? Any other questions or comments? Team, any other information that we should go ahead and share?
Jacob asked a question, Jean. Would there be a schedule for pushing data relating to your previous slide?
A schedule meaning when it's available. Our plan is that by late summer we'll have the automated mechanisms in place, that for the 9 partners, and then that I hope could be more widely available as well. Is that what you're referring to, the schedule for the availability?
No, he meant the frequency. Do you plan to pull? Will there be a schedule, like how many times a day will you pull?
Well, I guess that, so okay. So it could be that we go harvest, that the harvesting is just continually running on sites that have been identified, because we're looking for the CTDL, so it's not going to go looking for every website in the universe. It's going to be going to where it knows the CTDL is. And then as far as pushing data in, I think that can generally be real time as data changes. So, there could be a situation where the pushing organization that owns it, wants to push data at a specific time of the day or something, or they may want to push it in a workflow as data changes in real time. So it's a good question, and I'll come back with some more information, but I don't think it's going to be scheduled in so much so, once a day or it certainly would be, daily or as close to real time as possible. And does new...
Jean, Jacob had one more. And does the new data completely erase old data, or are all copies kept? I believe it is the latter. The whole thing is going to be backed up to the Wayback Machine, so that it's there forever and discoverable.
Yeah.
And the metadata links. So if there's a new version, it links to the previous version. So they never disappear.
Yeah, I'll make sure that, but the Internet Archive is the source for the Wayback Machine that Stuart was mentioning. And that brings up even more, so Jacob was great, probably think of even more questions, because each credential is a product. When you think about, like, you go buy a book and it has the unique identifier, the ISBN number, so each credential is a unique thing that's identified, and so it doesn't mean you're creating a whole new credential every time you maybe update information about how you access a learning opportunity to get it or something. So those kinds of things, there'll be things that the pusher of the information or the owner of the information determines as well in terms of how they replace a credential or just simply update a credential. Good question. Anything else? Any other comments from the team? We've got 2 minutes left.
Nope, I have none.
All right. Well, thank you to everyone for taking time today to join us. We truly appreciate it. Watch for the follow-up webinar that Scarlett will be sending later today. Also, this was recorded, so she'll include a link to it. So if you have colleagues that weren't able to participate, you can share that with them. It will include the PowerPoint as well as an attachment and some other information for you. So thanks everyone, and have a wonderful day.